Good morning, everyone. So welcome back to the live stream series at Empty Cloud Monastery. Today is a special occasion in that today we are giving a shout out to Buddhist Global Relief. So some of you may be familiar with Buddhist Global Relief as a organization started by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi to support various humanitarian efforts around the world, and particularly targeting the problem of starvation and chronic hunger and poverty. And this is quite relevant to the topic of the Brahma Viharas that we've been discussing. So I'll start by paying homage to the Buddhas, and then I'll talk a bit more about Buddhist Global Relief and a bit more about the Brahma Viharas. So we can start with bringing up a mind of respect for the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namassami. So again, we've been talking about the Brahma Viharas, so these divine states of mind, these sublime, pure states of mind. And as I was mentioning yesterday, these states of mind are not just an internal activity. They also are an external activity. They're things that we actually do in the world. Ultimately, in Buddhist practice, we don't make a distinction between internal and external. Internal and external are just ways of speaking, but in the absolute sense, it's not real. There is no distinction between inside and outside. So cultivating compassion internally naturally should express itself through acting on that compassion externally. And similarly, if we perform external acts of compassion, then that will help to nurture compassion within ourselves as well. So these are, again, they're not separable. And if we are genuinely developing a mind of metta and karuna, genuinely developing this mind of kindness, friendliness, compassion, benevolence, sympathy within ourselves, then that will become the basis for all of our decisions. So then naturally we will be inclined to make decisions which are of benefit to others as well as to ourselves. Naturally we'll make actions and decisions and choices which are based upon kindness and compassion. So Buddhist Global Relief is, as I mentioned, it's a relief organization started by Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. So one of the most senior and well-respected Western Buddhist monks. And he started this organization with the intent of helping to alleviate the suffering of the world in a very direct and tangible way, and particularly focusing on food insecurity. So one of the annual programs that they do is their action to feed the hungry. So in the past, it was walk to feed the hungry. The past couple years with the pandemic, they've had to change their mode of conduct a little bit, but the basic idea remains the same. So I just put a link to Buddhist Global Relief in the chat window, so you can check it out if you like. So yeah, this it started because again, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi was reflecting upon the Buddhist teachings of compassion and recognizing that there are many charitable organizations in the world which work to alleviate ordinary mundane suffering, but that there weren't as many coming from the Buddhist world, that there were many coming from actually especially the Catholic world. There's a remarkable devotion to charitable projects coming from the Catholic world. But that from the Buddhist world, there wasn't as much. It wasn't as well organized and extensive. So there are, of course, a number of Buddhist organizations that do amazing relief work. One of the biggest is the Tzu Chi Foundation from Taiwan. So a major organization that does a lot to alleviate suffering from especially disasters and natural calamities of various sorts. But recognizing that there was this seeming disparity between the concept of compassion and the actual application of it, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi decided that it was time to do something about bringing forward a very distinct Buddhist movement to provide relief to those who are experiencing ordinary suffering. Again, if you'd like to check out Buddhist Global Relief and what they do and consider supporting their efforts, I think it's a very noble and worthy project. It's something which has been going on for many years now and which does a lot of good in the world. And this is directly relevant to the topic of the Brahmaviharas that we've been speaking about. Again, it's quite strange if somebody sits there for an hour thinking, may everyone be happy and free of suffering. But then they get up from their meditation and they don't actually do anything whatsoever to help other people be happy and free of suffering. It indicates that there's a disconnect, a disjunct between one's theoretical commitment and one's actual commitment. There's many idioms which are present in the English language, which all point to the same idea, which is that you can really tell a person's true beliefs by how they act. So somebody says they believe in compassion, but they don't actually do anything compassionate. If they don't actually do anything to help other people, then that means they're not really compassionate, no matter what they say. Looking at somebody's conduct as a way of determining what their actual internal commitment is. And the same goes for ourselves. In fact, the Buddha says that we should be focusing on our own conduct, evaluating our own behavior. So not fixating so much on what other people do or don't do, because that's their karma, but rather asking ourselves, what am I doing? How do I choose to live my life? Am I making choices which are based upon kindness and compassion? Am I trying to bring more goodness into the world? Am I trying to reduce the suffering of the world? What am I actually doing? And is the effect of what I'm doing positive, helpful, supportive, or not? And how can I increase the positive impact that I have on the world? So, again, coming back to the Brahmaviharas, so yesterday I spoke particularly about the first three. So metta, which is loving kindness, benevolence, friendliness, the wish for everyone to be happy. And then the second one is karuna, so compassion or sympathy, which is the wish for everyone to be free of suffering, the wish for everyone to be free of pain and misery and anguish of any sort. And the expression of compassion in its perfect sense is actually exemplified by the Buddha. Because the Buddha attained awakening out of compassion for the whole world. out of the sincere wish to help everyone become free of suffering in the highest and fullest and most complete sense. But it's also exemplified through, looking to see how do people suffer, and what can I do to alleviate that, to reduce that, to help them find a way out of their suffering, or at least to reduce it a bit. And the third Brahmavihara, which is mudita, which, as I mentioned yesterday, its most direct meaning is gladness, happiness, joyfulness. So a selfless joy, a joyfulness which is not connected with getting what you want, or having what you want, or anything of that sort, but rather a joyfulness which is not tied to acquisition or possessiveness or self-centeredness of any sort. So today I'd like to start talking about the fourth one, which is upekkha. So upekkha is commonly translated as equanimity, which overall I think is quite a good translation. But it's important also to have a closer look at the meaning of this word. So the word upekkha has two parts. So it has the prefix upa, which means close or near, and the verb ikkha, which means to look at, to watch or to see. So upekkha then means to look closely, pay close attention. And this is very important. Because often when people start learning about equanimity, they mistake it for apathy or indifference. But this is not correct. Because if you have apathy towards something, then you're not going to be looking closely at it. You won't be paying close attention to it. You won't be interested at all. You won't care. Similarly with indifference. With indifference, you just won't care. And if you don't care, then you don't bother to pay close attention to something. Why would you waste your time paying attention to anything if you don't care about it? So upekkha, it has this characteristic of close attention, looking closely at things, paying careful attention to things. However, it also has the characteristic of being non-reactive. So it doesn't react to what one is experiencing. So upekkha is normally described as being the state of mind which is right in the middle. So it's not knocked into either liking or disliking. So it doesn't fall either to the extreme of desire or the extreme of aversion. But it's always maintaining a neutral stance in regard to whatever one is experiencing. So recognizing that the experience that's happening is just an experience, and that any liking or disliking is something extra that we add. Any pleasure or pain is something extra that we add. And this is also found in the suttas when the Buddha is talking about the Brahmaviharas. So as I mentioned, in several suttas, the Buddha talks about how each of the Brahmaviharas helps to overcome some particular obstacle or difficulty that we face. So metta, loving kindness, it helps to prevent the mind from being overcome by aversion. So this is, vyapada is the Pali word for this. And karuna helps to prevent the mind from being overcome by cruelty or hostility. Mudita helps to prevent the mind from being overcome by discontent. And the equanimity, in a couple of different suttas, the Buddha gives different answers to this. So in the Maharahula Vada Sutta, the Buddha says that equanimity helps to prevent the mind from falling into rejection. So pattiga is the tendency to reject things, to push things away. And in the Nissaraniya Sutta, the Buddha says that upekkha helps to prevent the mind from falling into passion, raga. So pattiga is rejection or aversion, so pushing away. And raga is passion or lust or obsessiveness. So upekkha helps to prevent the mind from falling either into pushing or pulling. So either pushing things away or pulling them towards us. So both approval and rejection. The mind is not falling into either one. The mind remains balanced and undisturbed and unaffected. But nonetheless, as mentioned, it still pays very close attention. It's still fully present with and alert to whatever is happening. And this is especially important when we apply upekkha to dealing with sentient beings. So upekkha, we still pay close attention to the sentient beings that we encounter. We're not ignoring them or apathetic towards them or indifferent towards them. We pay close attention. We see them as they are. But we also recognize that we cannot control others. We recognize that each being is making their own choices. They're generating their own karma. And that therefore, their happiness and sadness is their own choice. So equanimity then is recognizing that we cannot control what happens to others. So we may wish for others to be happy, but then they're not happy. So that can lead to despair. We may wish for others to be free of suffering, but nonetheless they continue to suffer. So again, that can lead to despair. So equanimity is recognizing that even if our hearts are overflowing with metta and karuna, even if we're doing everything we can to bring more happiness and less suffering to the world, nonetheless, beings will continue to suffer. They will continue to be unhappy because that is the nature of the world. So equanimity is recognizing that there is no value in being disturbed by the suffering of the world. There's no value in being upset by the suffering of the world. Nonetheless, we do what we can to help. And we do what we can to be of benefit. And this quality of paying close attention helps to give one the necessary information to be able to act appropriately, to be able to act out our kindness and compassion in the world. And as mentioned, it also equanimity also helps to prevent with the arising of passion or lust or obsessiveness. So this is another one of the major flaws that can sometimes arise in our mind. So when we encounter pleasant things, then we tend to be obsessed with them. When we think about what pleasant experiences might be accessible to us in the future, then we tend to try to seek out such experiences. We pursue such experiences. And then naturally that leads to discontent. In fact, it's arising from discontent and it fuels that discontent even more. And also it tends to lead to us doing all manner of unskillful and inappropriate things. So in the pursuit of our lust, our passion, our desire, our attachment, then when we prioritize that over metta and karuna, then we tend to do things which are not bringing happiness into the world. We tend to do things which are coming from a place of self-centeredness, a place of greediness, a place of stinginess. And from that posture of selfishness and greediness and stinginess, then we'll do anything whatsoever to get what we want, even if it means hurting other people, even if it means hurting ourselves. So equanimity then is recognizing that whatever is happening is not inherently pleasant or unpleasant. It's simply the current position of samsara. So as samsara is constantly weaving through its endless circle, its infinite cycle. So it's always somewhere. It's always at some position in that vast cycle, that vast circle. So whatever position samsara is currently in, well, that's just the position it's in. It's not good or bad. That's just the place in samsara that we're currently viewing. So equanimity is recognizing that whatever piece of samsara we're currently viewing, well, that's just the piece that's currently being viewed. That's all. There's no point in being upset by it, because it's just the nature of reality. It's like being upset by gravity. It's like, I'm really angry about the gravitational constant. It's like, well, that's nice, I guess. Doesn't change the gravitational constant now, does it? Doesn't do you any good whatsoever, does it? In fact, all it does is hurt you by making you upset. So there's not any point in being upset by the nature of the world. And also the nature of the world is that it's constantly shifting and changing. So whatever you try to grasp at, whatever you try to hold on to, it's already gone. And you can't grab anything, because the moment you reach to it, it's gone. You can't hold on to anything, because whatever you're trying to hold on to has already slipped through your fingers. So this then is the fundamental delusion of desire and obsessiveness and grasping. This fundamental delusion is the delusion that you're actually capable of holding on to what you want, when actually you're not capable. You never have been. You never will be. So what can we actually do? We cannot change the nature of reality. What we can do is we can change the posture of our own mind. So equanimity is the perfectly balanced state of mind, which is not knocked off balance by anything, which is not disturbable by anything. So this serves as a necessary balancing component for the other three Brahmaviharas. So again, as mentioned, metta, this mind of benevolence, of kindness, of wanting everyone to be happy, can be knocked off balance by recognizing that the world is full of beings that are not happy. So when we recognize that this is the nature of reality, then the mind settles back into imperturbability, this unbotherable state of mind, of equanimity. And you still try to bring happiness into the world, but you do so without attachment to result. Similarly with compassion. So with compassion, we wish for beings to be free of suffering, but nonetheless, samsara is still full of beings who suffer. That's its nature. It has always been that way, and it always will be that way. So you cannot remove all the suffering of the world. Not even the Buddha can do that. Because the nature of samsara is that it's full of suffering. So again, it's easy to fall into despair at that realization. So equanimity is recognizing, no, this is just the way things are. And there's no value in rejecting that. There's no benefit in rejecting that. First, you must acknowledge the way things are. Then you act accordingly. You act with compassion accordingly. So again, this is the mind of the Buddha. The Buddha knew perfectly well he could not save all beings. Nonetheless, he tried, because that's what Buddhas do. That's how they act. That's their natural behavior because of their compassion. So it's the same with equanimity. We know that we cannot remove the suffering of the world, and yet we try, because this is the way an awakened being acts. This is how the mind of wisdom acts. The mind of wisdom acts with perfect compassion. Despite the futility, we still act with compassion. And the mind of mudita, of gladness, joyfulness. With this, it's very easy to get swept up into an agitated excitement. And that agitated excitement prevents the mind from settling into serenity and focus and clarity. So equanimity also helps to balance out mudita. It helps to keep that joyfulness a serene joy, a peaceful joy. It keeps it from developing into an agitation of mind. So here, hopefully you can see how upekkha, so equanimity, is naturally a balancing factor for the other three. And it's also important to point out that upekkha, unlike the other three, upekkha is also listed as one of the bojjhanga, one of the awakening factors. So one of the 7 necessary components for awakening is the cultivation of equanimity. This mind which looks closely at reality without reacting. This mind which clearly sees each moment without any desire or aversion. The mind which clearly sees each moment without either approval or rejecting. So neither grasping nor pushing away. So the mind of equanimity is remarkably close to awakening already. It's already moving extremely close to the mind of full awakening. So with cultivating the Brahma Viharas, one is creating a powerful foundation. I mentioned yesterday how the Brahma Viharas form a powerful foundation for entering jhana, for developing strong samadhi. Especially the first 3 form a powerful basis for samadhi. The 4th one as well also supports samadhi, but equanimity also supports insight. It supports wisdom. Because through closely looking at reality with a non-reactive mind, then one's defilements start to melt away. One sees one's defilements for what they are. One sees their true nature. And naturally, one loses one's interest in one's own defilements, loses one's interest in feeding and fueling those defilements. And the defilements start to starve through lack of nourishment. They start to fade away because we're not keeping them up anymore. We're not maintaining them. So that brings us to the end of the 4 Brahma Viharas. Again, just a reminder that the Brahma Viharas are something that are meant to be acted out. They're meant to be performed. So they're both states of mind that we cultivate through meditation practice, but they're also bases of activity. That should be the fundamental basis for every decision and choice that we make. Which again, tying this back to Buddhist global relief, that's the basis of relief work. It's recognizing that if we truly are committed to compassion, then we will act that out in the world. We will recognize the suffering of others and do what we can to alleviate it. So I think that's everything I have to say today. So I'll go ahead and take any questions that you might have. Shadow of Label asks, what about people who try to be compassionate but can't experience compassion because of disabilities or something? I don't actually believe that there's anyone who is incapable of feeling compassion. Rather, for some people, it's more difficult because they have very strong habits of self-centeredness or apathy. So it makes it more difficult for them to develop compassion. But it's not impossible for anyone. Everyone has the capacity to train themselves in compassion. I don't think that there's people who are incapable of compassion. It's just, for some people, it's more difficult than others because of the deeply rooted habits of mind. But through practice, even the most hard-hearted, self-centered people can develop compassion. It's just a matter of practice and persistence. And Deborah says, last night I was glad to hear that you knew Brother Phap Hai. I can only imagine the great conversations. Your delivery and speaking voices are similar. Yeah, I mean, I've known Brother Phap Hai for many, many years. He's a really wonderful monk, really great practitioner and teacher. He's a wonderful example of equanimity and compassion. He has those qualities developed extremely well. Did you have a question?
Yes. Can you talk about the relationship between equanimity and tolerating unpleasant states of mind?
Yeah, so our resident David asked about the relationship between equanimity and tolerating unpleasant states of mind. Yeah, so whatever mind state is appearing, so whatever is appearing in the mind, we see it, we recognize it. So we see it closely, but recognize that it's just something which is arising of its own accord and will disappear of its own accord. As long as we don't get involved with the mental objects that appear, then they have no power over us. It's like background noise. Like in the distance, I hear an airplane, but I'm not flying an airplane. So why would I be the least bit bothered by that airplane noise? So it's the same. Yeah, as you're sitting there, some thoughts or images or states of mind might flow through the mind. But as long as you don't get involved, then there's no problem. As long as you don't participate or react, then those things will have no control over you. It'll be just as meaningless as background noise, and it will disappear relatively quickly. And whether it disappears quickly or not is beside the point, because you're not bothered by it. You don't participate and you don't react. So see it. So this is not ignoring it. We are seeing the mind state, but we do not participate and we do not react. Then there's no problem. Okay? Anita asks, can you please repeat the Pali word for aversion? I believe the word I used referred to was patiga. So patiga is, the literal meaning is it means pushing back. So pati means against, and ga means to grab or to push. So patiga means pushing back against things. So pushback. The other word I may have used is vyapada, which vyapada has more the meaning of hostility, though it's sometimes translated as aversion as well. It's important not to get too caught up on the English translations of Pali words. It's better just to learn Pali. So if you try to use the connotations of the English translations, then you often wind up coming to the wrong conclusions. But when you look at the etymology of Pali words, it's often very clear what the intended meaning is. Then Deborah says, I thought monk chat was this morning. Monk chat is this evening. So it's 7:30 New York time. You can join in. So you can ask your question during monk chat this evening. So we should be having a panel of 3 monks answering questions this evening. Anita asks, Bhante, would equanimity be seeing things as they are? Yes, that is one element of equanimity, is that, again, you're looking closely at your experiences, but without reacting. So we're not coloring our experience with our reaction. So when we react to something with liking or disliking, then that distorts our experience of the object. So equanimity helps us to have an undistorted perception of things. So yes, definitely it does help with seeing things as they are. Anita also asks, would you say from the place of equanimity, one can offer metta, mudita, karuna to self and others, just staying in the middle? Yeah, absolutely. Again, upekkha helps to balance the other 3 Brahma Viharas by preventing them from falling into negativity or unwholesomeness. Anita also asks, can one view the 5 khandhas that further elaborate who we are? Hence, upekkha is the way. Is this right view? I don't quite understand your question. Can you rephrase your question? Don't quite get what you're asking here. If you're asking, can we view the five khandhas with equanimity, with upekkha? Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, you should be. But if you mean something else, then please clarify your question. Then Bobby asks, which are known to have been taught first, the paramitas or the Brahmaviharas? Well, I'm going to let you in on a little secret, which is not actually much of a secret, which is that the first 500 years of Buddhist history are very blurry and unclear. So no clear records were kept during those 500 years. So Buddhist texts started to appear about 2,000 years ago. So written texts, anyway, started to appear about 2,000 years ago. And the early texts that started to appear, some were the precursors of what nowadays we would call the Pali Canon, the Theravada Suttas. Some were the precursors of what we would nowadays call the Mahayana Sutras. Vajrayana is definitely much, much later. But the Theravada and Mahayana Sutras both started to appear at the same time, which is about 2,000 years ago. So what was prior to that, in terms of when things appeared, that's a bit harder to pin down. It's not so easy to figure out. So there's a lot of scholarly guesswork involved. So the Brahmaviharas are unquestionably from the very earliest strata of the Buddha's teachings. So I would say, without doubt, the Brahmaviharas are things that the Buddha himself taught. And the paramitas, each of them separately, so each of them individually, also are things that the Buddha definitely taught. Whether the paramitas were taught as a single combined group by the Buddha is a little more doubtful. But each one of the individual paramitas he definitely did teach. But I also would just emphasize it doesn't really matter so much what was taught first. What matters is, does it help you progress towards awakening? Does it help you to reduce unwholesome states of mind, diminish dukkha, and progress towards awakening? Then Jen asks, are the edicts of Ashoka the earliest evidences that we have? This is starting to get a little off topic, might be more of a monk chat thing. But briefly, yes, the Ashokan edicts are some of the earliest written Buddhist documents that we have. But if you look at them, they have extremely minimal Dharma content. Very little Dharma content. And they're not composed of sutta quotes. There's some fragmentary references to Buddhist teachings. But the Ashokan edicts are not considered to be written sutta texts. Again, there's some Buddhist content there, but they're not records of Buddhist texts. They're not records of scripture. And again, they're quite limited in terms of their content. Then Shadow of Label asks, is it good practice to put oneself in chaotic places like sports games or construction sites to practice equanimity, to get stronger at it? Let's be realistic. Start with what's easy. If you can maintain perfect equanimity under easy conditions, which realistically most people can't, then, well, maintain equanimity under slightly more challenging circumstances. But I wouldn't necessarily recommend going out of your way to find chaotic places to practice equanimity. I mean, you can try that if you like, but look at the results. Is the result that you get better equanimity, or is the result that you get more restless and agitated? Generally speaking, if you're intentionally putting yourself in chaotic situations, you'll usually find that generates more restlessness and agitation of mind. But But your mileage may vary. You can try it out if you like and see what happens. And that's the end of the questions. Any other questions? No? So I think that's it for now. So once again, please do have a look at Buddhist Global Relief and what they're doing, and support them if you can. And also please join us this evening for Monk Chat at 7:30 p.m. So you can ask all of your random off-topic questions, anything even vaguely related to Buddhism, you can ask this evening, and we'll have a panel of monks to answer your questions. So for now, we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we'll see you next time.